Yeah, so I'm Stéphanie Picard. I work as a communications aid worker as part of the emergency response unit at the Canadian Red Cross. So whenever there's a disaster and the need is there, the Canadian Red Cross can send a team of specialized aid workers. Personally, my role, and I find it to be a very privileged one, is to document the work of our team. So we have very loyal donors that support our work, and whenever a crisis strikes, they're always willing to donate, and I'm able to capture pictures and stories to bring them back and show them what their support is able to do on the ground. We totally understand that people want to know where their money is going, and they want to know that their support is actually translating into direct assistance on the ground. And we're very committed at the Canadian Red Cross and throughout the Red Cross movement that, as you said, is a huge global network to provide a high level of transparency to our donors, but also to our beneficiaries. So you mentioned the Haitian people. It's extremely important that they know that we are providing the help according to the most urgent needs and helping the most vulnerable people, which is the Red Cross's mission. So the Red Cross the Canadian Red Cross specifically was there years before the tragic earthquake in 2010. And actually the Haitian Red Cross is present throughout the country. Whenever there's a disaster, the International Red Cross is there to provide support to local volunteers that have been working there for years and years and decades, and that know their country, know their needs. And so I can tell you that we provided housing solutions to tens of thousands of people following the earthquake. There has been details published not only before the report that you referred to, but also after the report to explain and to clarify where the money went. There are multiple ways to help people in terms of housing. So for example, there's building new houses for those who have lost their house. There's also training Haitian people to be able to repair their own houses, and in many cases reinforce them whenever they can, and make them more resistant to disasters. There's also support that can be given in the form of money to pay the rent. So some people were already renting before the disaster, but lost their means of subsistence, their jobs, their crops, so needed that support. So if you go on redcross.ca, you'll see details as to how every single dollar was spent in Haiti.
Is the fixation on the number of houses being built an imprecise figure or even a misleading one in terms of the Red Cross's impact there?
What I can tell you is that there was housing support provided to tens of thousands of people.
Okay.
So it was the particular context in Haiti makes it so there's many people that are not landowners. So when they lost their homes or they lost where they were living, even if they were landowners or if they were renting their house, they needed different types of help. And in collaboration with the Haitian Red Cross and in collaboration with communities, of course, throughout the way we devised plans to respond to those needs in the most adequate fashion. So there were houses being built, which is precisely what that report referred to, but there was also other means that were given in housing, but also in other sectors like health, like water and sanitation, because we know that access to clean water is very important in Haiti as well. So there are very detailed reports that provide a clearer view of how the money was spent in Haiti. So if we're talking from an international perspective, there are Red Crosses in almost every country in the world. And that means that there are volunteers that are in their communities, that are recruited in their communities and represent their communities and their communities' interests and needs and areas of improvement in terms of disaster preparedness, health, violence prevention. So we recruit in communities throughout every country to have people that can speak for their own communities and that can then help their own communities. So we have local volunteers, and then every local then there's groups that are organized so that whenever there's a disaster, like for example, when there was Hurricane Matthew, we knew many days before that there was risks of a hurricane hitting Haiti. And so the local Red Cross volunteers were there in their communities telling people to evacuate and helping them evacuate safely, distributing pre-positioned emergency supplies. And then when the hurricane hit, well, there were early assessments, and the Haitian Red Cross was able to say that they would absolutely need the support of the International Red Cross, and that's where we come in as the Canadian Red Cross. So one of the emergency needs that was identified was people needed basic medical attention. So a lot of these people in the southwest of Haiti were living in very remote communities. To give you an idea, a road that could typically take, here about an hour would take 5 to 6 to 7 hours, and very bumpy roads because there was flooding and damage. So we were able to bring a mobile clinic with a team of aid workers to provide basic help.
So you would definitely characterize the Red Cross then as more of a multilateral institution than something with sort of a hierarchical leadership structure globally?
I would say the strength of the Red Cross is both the global network. The Red Cross is present in almost every country, and its community strength. So the way that we're working closely with volunteers, and that there's definitely channels for volunteers to provide constant feedback as to is the help that we're giving on the ground meeting people's needs, and like you said, we're able to work together on a global level whenever one of the countries needs support from the outside. I'm going to start with more of a, eternal optimist side of things, but I think what's common to all our donors, supporters, volunteers, and people that work for the Red Cross is the desire to help the most vulnerable. And at the Red Cross, we're very lucky, and we have worked for decades and decades to build trust with the public, and many people know the Red Cross to be always there in communities to respond whenever people need help, and specifically whenever there's a disaster, and we foster that relationship. We do constant communications, and we use all the different channels that are available to us. So we know that social media, emails, online platforms like our website, we are constantly updating it to give the latest information to people that want to know what's going on in the world. And people can both be made aware of the different crises that are going on in the world, but also find different ways of contributing. I think also the strength of the Red Cross is that there are many levels where people can contribute. So you mentioned there is competition, but there's also different means. Someone may be able to go to the ground to help, but they also may be able to give a donation. And both of those things are just as important, and both of those things are necessary to the work of the Red Cross. So we make sure that people know they can donate, they can volunteer, they can even share the information with their network, because you never know who's going to be interested of working or being deployed abroad to help people after a disaster. So I think it's a question of trust. It's a question of constant communication and of feedback. I hope people will find that when you contact us via Facebook, when you contact us via Twitter, Instagram, we're on those platforms both to make people aware, but also gather people's feedback, because we want to make sure that our communications are reflecting what they want to know, what they want to see, and how they want to express their support.
So my last question was, what is, in your view, the biggest unknown strength or area where the Red Cross is working that most people don't know about?
I would say our work here in Quebec and Canada, specifically in Montreal, every day we have teams of volunteers that are deployed to help people that are victims of mostly house fires. So whenever you hear, a fireman's alarm downtown, I'm sure around McGill you hear a lot of those. a lot of times it's that translates for us into families that are being forced from their houses because there's a house fire that happened. And in that moment, we have a partnership with the City of Montreal so that we ensure that our volunteers are deployed quickly to that scene and are able to welcome people, give them temporary housing, give them the means to buy clothes and food for the emergency period while they find another housing solution. So that's once every day in Montreal. In Quebec, it's 3 times a day. And in Canada, it's every 3 hours. So it's people see a lot of the Red Cross when there's a large disaster, and we do very much appreciate that support. But there's also the work we do every day, and that's just as important to support that, be it through volunteering or donations. And everybody can learn about that on our website. We try to keep people informed that way because it's our job to let you know what's going on as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thanks. Yeah.